And good morning, everyone. Really appreciate that you have taken time out of your busy schedules to join us today for our virtual airport luncheon. So again, I hope everyone is healthy and safe and doing what they need to stay that way. My name is Andrea Ray, and I have the pleasure to serve as the President CEO at the Chamber. And on behalf of our board and staff, welcome to our virtual SEA luncheon. Hopefully you have your lunch close by. I have a sandwich here, a little turkey sandwich, and that you're able to have some snacks. It's a virtual event. That doesn't mean that you don't have to have some real food close by. So really appreciate you being here with us today. This copyrighted virtual event is presented by the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form without the express written consent of the Chamber. Thank you to our sponsors. Our media sponsor, South King Media, Scott and Teresa Schaefer, have been tireless advocates for our community as a small business themselves. They are dedicated to helping other small businesses grow, as well as keeping our community connected and informed. Scott is broadcasting this webinar live on Facebook so that even more people are able to watch and ask questions and engage with us today. And for those that are not able to join live, we will have a recording available for your convenience later. Now, just a few housekeeping notes. If you are joining us through Zoom, at the end of Mr. Lyttle's presentation, we will have audience Q&A, and it's really easy for you just to type your question into the Q&A function right here in Zoom. If you're joining us through Facebook, just go ahead and type your questions into the comments section on the live broadcast feed, and Scott and I will do our best to get those questions answered when we get to the Q&A portion after the presentation. So again, thank you so much. Thank you also to our host and title sponsor, of course, the Port of Seattle. Thank you to our event sponsor, Puget Sound Energy. And a great big thank you to our presenting sponsor, the Seattle Southside RTA, and President CEO, Catherine Kurtzman, who I will now invite to say a few words. Catherine, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Can you hear me? Perfect. It's wonderful to connect with so many familiar faces and friends of travel and tourism today. I miss seeing you all in person. But for those of you who are less familiar with the Seattle Southside Regional Tourism Authority, we're also known as the RTA. And I'm pleased to say together, the Chamber of Commerce and the Regional Tourism Authority are branding our combined cities around the airport as Seattle Southside. Why Seattle Southside, you may ask? Because more than 20 years ago, when we were developing this regional tourism marketing approach and exploring what to name it, a focus group composed of chamber businesses from around the region pointed out that the U.S. Postal Service permits the use of a Seattle address within our region. And many of our businesses chose to take advantage of Seattle's worldwide visibility and recognition. And frankly, simply, we don't have the financial resources to compete with Seattle's prominence. So why compete with it? Capitalize on it. If we tell someone internationally or domestically our business is located in Seattle Southside, they know exactly where we're located. So Seattle Southside is not the name of our organizations, it is the name of our regional destination. The RTA is responsible for promoting our combined communities as an attractive travel destination and enhancing its public image as a dynamic place to live, work, and visit. Travel spending in Seattle Southside provides jobs and helps fuel millions of dollars in economic output annually. In South King County, the RTA is a primary driver of these economic benefits by enhancing brand awareness and conducting sales and marketing efforts locally, domestically, and internationally to inspire travel. As you may well know, the pandemic has hit the travel and tourism industry particularly hard. The safety of our visitors and our community is our highest priority. Travelers and business community members can find the latest information on our website on how COVID-19 is affecting our Seattle Southside community and surrounding region. Even in these trying times, we're still talking to consumers so that they don't forget about the wonderful attributes of our destination. I'm pleased to share with you that this past Tuesday, the King County Council approved $8 million for a tourism recovery marketing plan, of which Seattle Southside RTA and Visit Seattle will administer together. I would like to thank many of you here today, our business community members, our Chamber of Commerce, the Port of Seattle, and our city partners for your advocacy and support of this recovery effort. It was a long process, but we're finally there. And now for your viewing pleasure, I'd like to share a sample of the many visitor experiences to be had in Seattle Southside. I think you will be amazed. Enjoy.
Come on at 10, 9, 8.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you to our presenting sponsor, the Seattle Southside RTA. We truly do live just in a magical, phenomenal place. And what keeps our location so attractive for businesses and community members alike, a big part of that are our elected officials, our board members, our chamber ambassadors. So if you have joined us today, go ahead and type into the chat if you are an elected official, a board member, or a chamber ambassador, so that I can recognize you individually for taking the time to be with us today. So again, really appreciate you and your support. Our chamber is a nonprofit business organization that has served the communities of Burien, Des Moines, Normandy Park, SeaTac, and Tukwila since 1988. And we focus on business advancement and creating opportunity for South King County because we know economic equity and economic development don't just happen. We all need to work together to raise the tide for our region. And we are proud to do that every day. Thank you so much to Sam Pace, who's joining us today, to Scott Kennedy on our board, to Jill Andrews, who's a board member with our chamber, and then also with Destination Des Moines. So again, thank you so much for being here with us today. We were founded on the belief that we are better and stronger together. And it is in that spirit of collaboration that we bring opportunities to connect and engage, and why we are so grateful to our members that despite the incredible hardship our business community has sustained, they continue to give back to our community, to support our nonprofit, and to support one another. Want to just thank our new members that have joined us this year. Thank you to all of our renewing members that continue to invest in our community. Your passion, your drive, your focus inspire us at the Chamber to continue doing our work. Someone else that is equally inspiring to us is Mr. Lance Lyttle, Managing Director, Aviation. Airport operations have been substantially impacted during the pandemic. However, Lance and his team have persevered, and it's no wonder, as Mr. Lyttle has a breadth of experience and depth of knowledge of airport operations, having worked in both Atlanta and Houston prior to joining us in the Pacific Northwest. He has extensive experience in spearheading strategic and business plan developments, as well as being a skilled leader of ideas, management, and innovation. Mr. Lyttle additionally leads the efforts towards developing the Sustainable Airport Master Plan for the future that will continue to provide economic benefits for our region. Mr. Lyttle, thank you so much for being with us today, and I am turning it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea. Appreciate the gracious introduction, and thank you and the Seattle Southside Chamber for inviting me, having me speak today. As everyone knows, that the pandemic has been very impactful on pretty much every industry across the globe, and aviation is one of those industries that have been significantly or severely impacted as well. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and the viewers on the COVID-19 response and recovery effort by the airport and by the Port of Seattle in general as well. So thank you for having me here today. Next slide, please. So today, we're going to talk about four things. When we started and we experienced the pandemic, there were three basic questions that we decided that we really needed to answer. The first one was, what is it that we needed to do to weather the storm, to get through in the short term what was happening to us? The second question that we asked was that, what is it that we needed to do to lead the recovery? We are a major economic engine for this region, and we thought it was important that we played a key role in leading the recovery as well. And the third was preparing for the next norm or the new norm. We really realized at an early time frame that there was going to be significant changes after this pandemic. And even though some things were going to get back to norm, there were some things that was just going to change forever. So what is it that we needed to do to prepare for the next norm? And, you know, while we're doing all of this, it was very important to us that we did not lose sight of our responsibility to continue to invest in the community, especially in the communities that were impacted disproportionately by the pandemic. And one of the things the pandemic really did was brought out how some communities were disproportionately impacted even more. So it really highlighted that. Next slide, please. Thanks. So weather in the storm. So one of the things, you know, we really needed to understand was how massive was this storm? Was it a category 3, a category 4? What were we actually facing? And one of the things that we realized, it was a category we have never seen this before type storm. And so it was important for us to understand how deep, how impactful, how severe this storm was in order for us to respond to it in the immediate term. Next slide. So just to give you a sense of how impactful this storm was. In the beginning, back in 9/11, we thought that was probably the worst thing that would happen to our industry. And then the Great Recession came along a few years after that, and we thought that was the worst thing ever to happen to the industry. But if you look at the chart that I have on the screen right now, you'll see that the pandemic, the current pandemic, is actually worse than the Great Recession and 9/11 combined. At the end of 2019, we ended up approximately had 52 million passengers coming through our airport. This year, we're struggling to get to 20 million. We're not sure if we'll even see 20 million passengers come through the airport. And you'll see the impact of that. The lifeblood of this airport is actually passengers. Even though we have a huge cargo operation, or a large enough cargo operation here, the lifeblood of this airport and the economic impact that it delivers to the region is based on passengers actually coming through the airport. So this is a major, major negative impact to us at the airport. Next slide. So some of them, we have several metrics that we pay close attention to. One of them is the number of passengers that come through the checkpoint on a daily basis, the TSA checkpoint on a daily basis. And as you can see from the green line above, typically at around this time, especially during the holiday season, we're at about 60, 70,000 passengers coming through the checkpoint. In April, let's put it into perspective, in April of this year, we had 2,500 passengers coming through the airport, coming through the security checkpoint. That's how bad it was. Now we're averaging maybe about 17,000 passengers coming through the checkpoint. There's been a slow and steady increase, which is great. But what we're seeing right now is plateauing, and I think it's because of the resurgence that we're seeing in states such as California, in Florida, Arizona, and we're thinking that's having an impact on people actually traveling. So it's been increasing slowly but surely, but we're seeing a plateau again, which is encouraging. But to put it in perspective, nothing near what we would typically see at this time, say for example in 2019. You're looking at about 70,000 versus now 17,000. We're hoping to hit the 20,000 mark, and ironically last week we had, you would not believe it, we had 19,999 passengers coming through our checkpoint. We just needed one more person to get to the 20,000, but we missed that one. Next slide, please. So what are some of the things that we did? Of course, so the health and safety of our employees are extremely important to us. So one of the very, very first thing that we did was we asked every employee that could telework to actually work from home. Don't come into the office unless your job actually requires you to be here at the airport. So that was one of the first things that we did. We also realized that our tenants at the airport were hurting really, really bad. There was no passengers coming through the airport, so they were not doing any business. And of course, they have to pay us rent. They have to pay us a minimum annual guarantee as well. And so one of the first things that we did was to provide relief through rent deferrals. We deferred rent all the way until next year. And initially we had deferred MAG, minimum annual guarantee, and eventually we eliminated those for the rest of the year. At this point, it really, cash is king, and it's important that these companies and us as well preserve cash flow. So these measures that we took were really to help them to preserve cash flow. And this ranged from the big companies, the airlines, the concessionaires, the rent-a-car companies, all the way through to taxi drivers, limousine drivers, TNC, Uber, Lyft, etc. We provided relief to most of the tenants here at the airport because we think it's important for them to survive and weather this storm as well as us. A few other things that we did, we took immediate step to reduce our cost of operating. We had a hiring freeze, or we call it a frost, because there are certain positions that we continue to hire because they're critical to the airport. We stopped any non-essential travel at the airport, and we looked at several initiatives that we were undertaking, and we put a pause on those initiatives. Again, cash flow preservation was the key here. So those were just a few of the things that we did to weather the storm. So the next thing now was, what is it that we needed to do to lead the recovery effort? Thank you. So next slide. So this is where we came up with our Fly Healthy at SEA initiative. And this is a multi-layered, multi-phased initiative that we have that I'm going to speak a little bit about. We had a three-pronged strategy, right? We're going to be focusing on what we do as a part of the industry, as the port in general, not just the airport, but also what we do specifically at the airport. And industry-wide, the airports are a network, right? They're a network of airports. And the chain is as strong as the weakest link. And so it's important that there are some standards across the industry, right? If we're doing certain things to ensure that we're safe and we're secure and we're healthy, and that's not happening at other airports, that's not going to instill confidence in the passengers that are traveling. And so we work very closely with ACI, Airport Council International, and AAAE, American Association of Airport Executives, to ensure that we had this consistency across the airports, not only in the country, but across the world. We had 2 members of our team that participated on a task force that look at what airports need to do worldwide in order to restore traveler confidence at airports. And so that was our industrial approach. We also needed to ensure that across the port we have standards, right? We remember, we're not just the airport, we have maritime, we have fishing, we have cruise, we have cargo operations and economic development as well. So we needed to ensure that we have these standards across the port of Seattle. But then we had to do some specific things at the airport, and those are some of the things I'm going to talk about as part of this Fly Healthy at SCA initiative. And before I get to the next slide, I just want to highlight that preparing our facility for your return, passengers' return, takes a whole lot of collaboration, and it's a very complex effort. There are so many different organizations and individuals that touch or interact with a passenger as they journey through the airport. And you'll see this on the next slide. Next slide. So this is a very busy slide, but it's intentional, because we just wanted you to understand how complex it is. For example, as part of the Healthy Initiative, what we wanted to do was, what would it take for a passenger who goes from being dropped off at the curb or parking in a parking lot or being dropped off by a taxi to go all the way to an aircraft, or from the aircraft all the way to ground transportation? What would it take to have that person have a touchless journey, not touching anything at all? And this kind of gives you some idea of the collaboration, all the various different organizations and individuals that would have to collaborate, whether it's from the ground transportation, the taxi operators, the shuttle bus operators, Uber and Lyft, all the way through to our airlines, ticketing agents, the TSA, Transportation Security Administration. If it's an international flight, Customs and Border Protection or CDC has to be involved. Then there is our airport dining and retail that provide food and beverage services at the airport and retail. And then very, very important part of the picture here is our janitorial services, the people who actually keep this airport clean. And one of the great thing about, I guess, the silver lining of the cloud is people realize how important our janitorial services team members are to the operations of this airport, all the way through to baggage claim, getting your bags. What would it take for a touchless journey? And you know, one of the more complicated part, as an example, is we can make a lot of the travel experience touchless, but then you get to an elevator, and how do you operate an elevator without it being touchless? So even that we're looking at, do we have voice command to, you know, say which floor, etc. So we're looking at all of that. Some things we have done, some things it's going to take a few more years for us to get it done. Next slide, please. So as I said, we have a multi-layer approach, right? We don't think there is any one silver bullet to containing the coronavirus. So we have a multi-layer approach, and these are just some of the layers that we have in place at the airport. Face covering is required at the airport. We have protective barriers, plexiglass barriers to protect or have separation between the people who work at the airport and members of the public. Dining and retail has changed significantly. We want the dining and retail experiences to be, you can purchase, order anything, you can see a menu without having to touch anything. So many of the restaurants that you'll go to at the airport, you'll see a QR code, you can use your phone, get that QR code, the menu pops up, and you can see what's on the menu without having to touch anything. On the back end of the airport dining and retail, all of the workers have to go through a temperature check prior to start working, and many of them have a technology that we're testing by a company called Path Spot, where once you wash your hand, you have to put your hand under this device, and the device will actually tell you if your hand is clean enough for you to return to work. So lots of things that we're doing in that area. Now, the airport has always been extremely clean, but it has never been this clean. We're cleaning and we're cleaning and we're cleaning again. Just really frequent sanitization of the airport. We have more than 250 hand sanitizers throughout the airport. And touchless technology is where we're investing. Even though there are lots of things that we're not sure what's going to happen in the future, the one that we're betting on is that touchless technology will be the way of the future. So we're investing heavily in touchless technology. Next slide, please. Another layer that we actually just completed a proof of concept is actually temperature check-in. We actually did it for maybe about 3 days. We had a proof of concept where we had cameras that actually record your temperature. We did it at the international arrivals, our existing international arrival facility, the FIS. And we also did it at checkpoint 5 for a few weeks, where we tested the temperature of people who were departing, domestic departures at checkpoint 5. Got very interesting information. I think we probably scanned about over 9,000 people. There were some challenges with people who wore glasses or wear hats, etc. So it was a good learning experience for us. Passengers actually were very receptive about this, and ironically, there was no one that had a temperature over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was very interesting. So next slide, please. Now, as part of the lead in the recovery effort, our construction projects are extremely important to us. We have a total, if you calculate all the projects that we're undergoing at the airport, now we're looking at about $3.7 billion. So as I said earlier, one of the things we had to do was to manage cash flow. And as we looked at what projects do we continue with, which ones do we stop, and there are some projects that we have actually deferred, and there are other projects that we are accelerating because we're taking advantage of the lull in traffic. We can close more gates and move forward. But the important point here is with many of these mega projects like the ones that you're seeing right now, the IAF or the International Arrival Facility, the North Satellite, the baggage handling system, and our central terminal project, these projects provide hundreds of jobs, right? Literally hundreds of jobs. And one of the key things that we know that's very important, especially during this pandemic when lots of people are losing jobs, is to actually continue creating jobs within the region. So this is a major part of us leading the recovery effort. And the great thing about this is that these projects don't only create jobs, but these projects create quality jobs, or what we call living wages jobs. It's important. I'm just going to touch on a few other projects that we're undertaking and the status of these real quickly. Next slide. So this is the bridge actually that goes over the taxiway at the International Arrival Facility. Just interesting trivia. This bridge is actually the longest bridge across a taxiway anywhere in the world. I think you guys might have heard me say it before. If this bridge, if you actually flip it vertical, it is actually about 300 feet taller than the Space Needle. It's almost as long as the Eiffel Tower in Paris. So it's a huge undertaking and a huge structure. And the escalators that you're seeing there in that V shape are some of the longest escalators that would be anywhere in the world. So we're making significant progress. In fact, that picture is a bit outdated. Most of the skin is already on this facility. If you come to the airport, you will see it. Next slide. And so this is the interior of the facility. To the left, that's the baggage claim area. That's where you'll actually claim your bags when you come in on an international flight. And if you compare it to the existing facility, which we have limited amount of space and carousel, this is about 5 times the size of it. And the level of service in our existing facility is nowhere near. Again, this new facility will provide a 450,000 square foot facility. And that's another picture of the bridge on the external picture. And inside the actual bridge itself, it will have moving sidewalk, and it spans a total distance of about 900 feet across. Next slide. This is the North Satellite facility, over $700 million project. This facility is occupied primarily by, almost exclusively by Alaska Airlines. This will add an additional about 260,000 square foot to the old facility that was built back in the 1970s. Also, the international facility that we have was built back in the 1970s as well. So 2 facilities that really needs to be modernized. Next slide. And this is a picture of the progress that's taking place on the right. If you have been to the airport recently and you had your flight out of the North Satellite, you'll see our brand new escalators and stairwell that's in place, as well as a glass elevator, not operational as well, but as yet we can see just to the right, and that's the interior as well. It's going to be a really spectacular facility. So again, we think it's important for us leading the recovery effort. We think it's important for us to continue with some of these projects so that again we can play that leadership role and we can continue to create those living wages jobs within the region. Next slide. So preparing for the next norm. As I've said before, there's a lot of uncertainty that's coming up. I think we have a really solid plan, but the reality is that there is so much that we don't know. And even though we have a solid plan, there are certain things that we'll just have to figure it out as we go along. We're not gonna say we're an expert in everything and we know exactly what to do, because in certain cases we don't know. We're faced with a situation that none of us has ever faced before. There's no airport that we can go to and say, hey, when you had the pandemic here the last time, you know, what did you guys do? What were some of the lessons learned? What did you do right, do wrong? There's no benchmark or point of reference to go to. So even though we have a really solid plan in place, certain things we'll just have to learn as we go along and figure it out as we go along. And that's kind of a challenging reality that we face right now, along with the uncertainty of when passenger traffic will come back to the airport as well. Forecasting has always been challenging for us. Forecasting is even more challenging right now with the pandemic in place. So, but we have to prepare for the next norm, and I'm going to speak about some of the things that we're doing to get us ready for the next norm. So as I said before, next slide, please. As I said before, touchless technology it had started already, and we think the pandemic will just accelerate it. It will be the expectation of our passengers to go through potentially the entire travel experience without having to touch anything, whether it's in the restroom, whether it's going through the security checkpoint, whether it's at a ticket counter. The expectation is they will touch nothing, maybe except their cell phone or a credit card in their hand or something, some other device, but not having to touch anything that does not belong to the passenger. So that's what we're looking at. Facial recognition is one technology that we've been testing here for the longest while. It works, you know, fairly well, but there are challenges and concerns that have been expressed that we have to make sure we address, and policies that we have established that we have to make sure it's adhered to. Their equity issue, their race issues associated with facial recognition that we have to ensure that we either mitigate or address as we move forward with this type of technology. Capacitive sense devices, we're also looking at that as well. I don't know if you guys remember the old days with a stylus. They used to use a stylus. So we're looking at technology like that, where you need to touch something, but you don't have to touch it with your hand. You can touch it with a device. And as I said before, voice recognition, again, is another technology we're looking at. There are elevators that you can use voice recognition to say floor 3, floor 5. And I've even seen elevators with buttons on the floor that you can actually step on those buttons to decide which floor you're going to go to in a particular building. So we're looking at all of that. It's not cheap, it's very expensive, but we have to look at all the options. And then there is near field communication and radio frequency identification, such as if you're coming into the parking garage, you know, and you have one of our cards, you don't have to touch anything. You just put the card close to it and the arm of the garage open up. I think Apple Pay is probably another example of near field communications as well. And we'll use RFID or radio frequency identification to track bags going through our systems as well. So these are just some of the touchless technologies that we're undertaking right now. Next slide. And health, of course, healthy travel innovation. As I said earlier, we did a pilot or a proof of concept with temperature check-in, and with that we were actually using, you know, a temperature gun to test your temperature. But if you go to certain airports, for example in Japan, or certain places in the Middle East and other places in Asia, they actually, and in the Caribbean as well, they actually have temperature sensing devices that actually test your temperature as you walk through the international arrival process. So we're looking at that. There's ultraviolet or UV light cleaning that we're looking at as well. There are pros and cons associated with that. There are certain areas that UV light won't go to. We're not sure exactly how effective it is, but again, we're putting everything on the table. Physical distancing sensors, we actually have this installed at the airport already. Ironically, it was not installed for that purpose. It was installed to help us to track the number of people going through our security checkpoint, but we have now modified and adapted it to actually monitor whether people are physically distancing at the security checkpoint. So we kind of lucked out on that one. And we're looking at, some other things that are controversial: health certificate or passport, as they call them, health passport. We're looking at those options. When you're traveling, you can have all your, or some of your relevant health data information. There's controversy associated with that, but we're looking, as I said, everything is on the table. And after the pilot that we've just completed with the temperature checks, we're now looking at testing for COVID at the airport. Many of our passengers that we have surveyed are asking that question: can I get a test at the airport? Because where I'm going to be quarantined for 14 days if I don't have a recent test. So we're looking at that. How do we bring testing to the airport? But more importantly, how do we bring rapid testing? There are companies out there that are saying, hey, we can do testing, 15 minutes, you get the results. Pros and cons again associated with that, not as accurate as the test that goes back to the lab. And there are lots of false positive, but our expectation is that even with these cons associated with these testing, our expectation is that it will get better and better. And we see rapid testing and or a vaccine as probably the game changers that will really influence whether people start traveling in significant numbers again coming to an airport. So that's on the table. That's something we're looking at as well. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we're doing to keep the airport clean, as I said before, we've been cleaning, doing significant amount of cleaning before, but even recently, a few weeks ago, we have an agreement now with the TSA to conduct additional cleaning in the checkpoint areas on an hourly basis. So the bins that you use are going to be cleaned every hour. The divestiture area, the areas where you take off your shoes, the recomposure areas where you put your stuff back on, all of those areas and the handrails in those areas are going to be cleaned every single hour. So you'll see staff just there, just cleaning every hour. It's a very intense, very expensive process. The good thing is that we are actually getting compensated by the TSA to do this. So we have grant that's available for us to do this. So that's a good thing. Escalators, we're testing a new microfiber cleaning system, which removes 99% of the germs without harmful chemicals. And another cool one is the Victory electrostatic sprayers that we're using to clean the passenger loading bridges, the food courts, checkpoints, and several hold room areas. We do this every night. So that's pretty cool. And then we have Casper that's coming, and that's not Casper the Friendly Ghost. That's probably dating me here. Some people probably have no clue what Casper the Friendly Ghost is. But Casper in this case is continuous airport and surface pathogen reduction system. And it will arrive next week. And this will clean up to 1,500 square foot per mobile unit. And for those of you who like technology and chemistry and negative and positive iron, you can read up on this technology and see exactly how it works and how it disinfects the air around the devices. And next slide, please. So there are certain two accreditation that we're going to be pursuing. The first one is Global Biorisk Advisory Council. And this accreditation means that if we get this accreditation, it establishes and maintains a cleaning, disinfection, and infectious disease prevention program to minimize risk associated with infectious agents such as the coronavirus. So that's very important to us. And the other one is ACI Airport Council International. They just started this new international airport health accreditation. And this one will really demonstrate to our passengers, staff, regulators, governments that we prioritize health, safety in a measurably established manner. Remember, the whole effort behind Fly Healthy at SEA is to restore the confidence of our passengers to travel through the airport, to start traveling again through the airport and getting on airplanes. In addition, though, I must point out, it's not just about restoring the confidence of the passengers. We also need to restore the confidence of the people who work at the airport, or employees, the employees of all the organizations that are here at the airport, people who do business at the airport, construction workers, everybody works at the airport. It's important that they understand that what we're doing, and they understand also, and they're confident they're working in a safe and healthy environment as well. And then the last picture there in the diagram on the slide shows time. The restroom was cleaned, it's up to queue. And the customers can actually scan. Before we had the smiley face where you had to touch, and of course, we're trying to go touchless now. So there's a QR code that you can just scan with your smartphone, and you can provide feedback to us whether you think the restroom is clean, not clean, etc., whether you're satisfied or not. So that's in most of the restrooms right now. Next slide. One of the areas that we were still getting complaints, even though we had more than 5,000 signs all over the airport, we had more than 250 dispensers all over. We were still getting complaints about the hold room areas and the seating in the hold room areas, that people were not social distancing. So recently we have installed the signs on the seats, again, with the hope that our passengers will follow these signs and adhere to the social or physical distancing rule. Also, we were seeing queuing in our passenger loading bridges without social distancing taking place. So I've added signs in those areas as well in order to assist our passengers or remind our passengers that physical distancing, even if you have a mask on, physical distancing is still an important component. So those are just some of the few things that we're doing as part of the preparing the airport for the new norm or the next norm. Now, as I said before, it's very important for us to still, even within this pandemic, or especially, rather I'd say within the pandemic, to continue to invest in our community, right? The pandemic has shown that there are certain areas, again, that's just disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And it shows some of the challenges that these communities faced prior to the pandemic, and it's just been amplified now by the pandemic. So next slide. So the port has made new investment in community benefits programs to ensure that all communities are prepared to thrive in this recovery. In June of this year, the commissioners committed an additional $3 million in community benefit efforts that fund short-term economic recovery programs, youth employment, and tourism initiatives. And because the youth employment tripled during the pandemic, I'm not sure if people realize that, the port had $1.5 million opportunity initiative provided summer jobs to 220 youth ages between 16 to 24 within communities most adversely impacted by COVID. On the tourism side, to rebuild state tourism and generate consumer confidence around travel, the port announced a partnership with the Washington Tourism Alliance, and funding will kick off a multifaceted statewide marketing campaign over the next 15 months to positively impact the state and the port's travel assets and bring back important travel service and hospitality jobs. It's very important that we get these jobs back and get people employed so they can provide for their families. Next slide, please. So the South King County Fund, so the Port of Seattle established the South King County Fund to develop equity-based partnership and to provide resource and support in historically underserved near airport communities. The fund will award $10 million between 2019 and 2023 to address noise mitigation, environmental health, and sustainability in these ethnically and culturally diverse communities. A very important program. Next slide, please. And so I started out the presentation today with some charts about the airport traffic. So I wanted to end on this one, which shows the regional hotel activity according to Visit Seattle Weekly Report. The hospitality industry has been incredibly hard hit in our economy. It's the industry that's lost the largest percentage of jobs. That's our understanding. But we have one positive thing to talk about, and that's how airport area hotels have pivoted to keep as much business as possible. We know that hotels in the airport area are really hustling to attract more corporate and government businesses. And this chart really motivates us because it reminds us how important it is to keep travel at our gateways safe and healthy, and that we communicate to travelers the steps that we're taking in order to restore their confidence to start to travel again to the airport. So next slide, please. So in summary, as I said before, the three questions that we needed to answer: what did we need to do to weather the storm? What did we need to do to lead the recovery? What did we need to do to prepare for the next norm? Weathering the storm was important for us. We needed not only to get us through the storm, but we needed to provide relief to our tenants at the airport so they could weather the storm and their employees could get through the storm. So we had short-term relief measures. But we also took measures to protect our employees, and we took financial measures to protect our business as well. We had to be fiscally responsible as well. We are at $22.5 billion impact on this industry. We account for 150,000 jobs, 430 million in state and local taxes. So we think it's important for us to play a major role in leading the recovery and preparing for the next storm. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We know touchless technology is going to be one of the key. As I said before, there are certain things that we'll have to figure out as we go along, because we just don't have the answer for everything. We think we have a really great Fly Healthy at SCA initiative, multi-layered, multi-phased strategy that we think is working very, very well. And again, the objective of the program is to restore employee confidence, passenger confidence, but also employees and people who work at the airport. And finally, especially in this time, we have to continue our investment in the communities, especially areas in the community that are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you guys for having me here today, and I'll be happy to attempt to answer any questions that you may have.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lance. Really appreciate it. We do have a slew of questions here, so kind of covering a lot of the topics that you went over in your presentation. And so I'm going to kind of first center a lot of the questions on, health and safety, right? So as you mentioned, that really is very much, top of mind for people. And so the first question is a pretty simple one, which is just, is it safe to fly?
Yes. Yes, I think it is. I traveled 2 weeks ago. I did a lot of traveling. I went to Phoenix. I went to Dallas. I went to Miami. I went to Kingston, Jamaica. So I did a lot of traveling. And what was really, what impressed me was that all the airports that I've been to, they're all taking similar steps. Like we are, the social distancing, everybody had to wear a mask, there was sanitizers all over the place. And even the hotels that I went to, it was the same thing. You had to physical distance, you had to wear a mask, etc. And if anyone from the airlines is here, they'll tell you how the filtration system within the airplane itself work and how often air from outside is actually exchanged and how those filters are hospital grade filters in those airplanes. And actually in the airport as well, the filters that we have in the airport are way above, what's required per the authorities. So I think it is for me, it's safe to travel. It's a decision though that each individual will have to make. We're trying to provide as much information to potential travelers so they can make that decision, so they can decide if they think we're doing enough to restore their confidence in traveling through the airport. I've done it. I feel very comfortable doing it. So, but of course, we have to take the precautions: social distance, wear a mask. I went and did a test before I traveled, and I quarantined myself when I came back. So I think I took all the precautions.
I appreciate that. And I know I traveled, pretty recently too, with kids. And I would just say, the follow-up, question to that was just, are there any tips, for people who have flown recently? And I'll just say, with traveling with kids, I would just say practice, right? So just like we were practicing, with the kids wearing their masks, when we were anticipating and didn't know whether or not they would be doing, in-person learning or distance learning. It takes practice. And I know for us as adults, we're very, hyper vigilant and hyper aware. Maybe kids just aren't used to it as much, right? So social distancing for the kids too, practicing and practicing at home helps a lot, so that perhaps you won't be like me in the airport, stop licking your hands, right? Which is what, my daughter was doing in the airport. So that's my tip, is, practice, especially if you're flying with children and young children, just with being safe, and wearing those masks. So that's good. Next question. So this is coming from one of our attendees, and so do you envision that some of the changes that you talked about, will be permanent changes to airport operations even after the pandemic was over? I know you talked a lot about some of those, new technologies that you're investing in, especially the touchless technology, or the voice activated technology, facial recognition, all of those things. How much do you anticipate will just be part of the, new travel normal, right? Before, 9/11, traveling was different. And now, post pandemic, how do you have a sense of how much our traveling experience will be changed forever?
Yeah, it's hard to try to predict the future, but I think the one sure thing is going to be, there's going to be an expectation that a passenger should be able to travel, to have an entire travel experience and not touch anything. I think that's going to be an expectation, even after you find a vaccine, or if you are able to do rapid testing at the airport. I think the expectation is that passengers will want to be able to travel. There are some people, even prior to the pandemic, when they go into a restroom, they don't want to touch anything, right? Period, right? There are many people, and I think that's going to be just multiplied in other areas outside the restroom. They're not going to want to touch a kiosk, they don't want to touch basically anything. And I think touchless travel is going to be the norm going forward. What will it entail? Maybe, voice recognition, etc. Facial recognition, as I said, is probably one of the more mature one, but it comes with a lot of concerns from various different groups, social groups, in terms of privacy issues and equity issues and race issues, etc., that we definitely have to address, and to make sure that we take all of those into consideration. I think you might have companies or airports know that in addition to having a chief security officer and a chief safety officer, may very well now have a chief health officer. Health is really a part of safety, but we might very well see that actually being separated and being a different unit or a different focus, where you have a chief health officer, as an example, at least during the recovery. Maybe after the recovery that may change, but I know there's going to be a significant emphasis. I think how we clean and sanitize airports, that's just going to change forever. I don't think we're going to go back to the way we did it before.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I was always one of those people too, it's just, try to limit as much as possible, everything that you touch, because, it's lots of hand sanitizer and, just trying to be as hygienic as possible. So I appreciate that. I think, there will be some of those things that will just, be the new normal. Next question. So this is related a little bit more to the, economic considerations, which was, earlier, there were discussions about SeaTac perhaps becoming a nonprofit entity, maybe for a couple years, to get through the pandemic. What is the status of those discussions, or what does that path forward look like, and why that might be something that
and I think I actually did a blog on this because there was a lot of misleading information. We're not a for-profit organization. We have never been a for-profit organization. Any revenues that we make up and above our operating expenses has to go right back into the airport. We don't pay dividends. We don't have anything like that. So there is no transition to a non-profit organization. We have never been a for-profit organization. So we know we're an enterprise fund, and so we have to actually be able to generate enough revenues to, pay our debt service and to pay our operating expense and to reinvest back into the business. But we've never been a for-profit organization in the sense of a private sector organization, such as an airline or, the concessionaires that operate at the airport. So, one of the things I've always said, the private sector companies are in it for the money. We are in the money for it. We make money to provide it, and that it is a public service. As I said, we don't pay dividends or anything like that. All the additional revenues that we make over operating expense has to come back or reinvested back into the airport, period.
Perfect. I appreciate that clarification. That's good. So here's a question just on travel trends. So I know, like you said, we can't predict the future or look into a crystal ball, but do you have any sense for what travel trends might be like next year? Or are we going to continue to expect that, travel will increase kind of incrementally, at the airport? Any anticipations for, a spike in travel in any quarter in 2021? And I'll let you answer that, and then I have a couple of thoughts too.
Yeah. There's a lot of it depends in the answer here. We are forecasting for the end of this year, we're going to be down about 60% relative to last year. And we're forecasting next year will be down about 30%. So it should look better. However, everything depends, I think, on how soon we get a vaccine, as well, how soon we're able to do rapid testing. One of the interesting trends, though, that we're seeing is after 9/11, after the Great Recession, business travel has actually led the recovery. What we're seeing now is leisure travel is actually leading the recovery. There are many companies that are still not making a decision to do business travel. They're doing meetings like how we're doing it right now, virtual. And we're not sure how much of an impact that's going to have going forward. But we see actually leisure travel. That's what we're seeing right now. Leisure travel is leading the recovery back. We had a steady, as I saw on the charts that I showed earlier, since April, we really had this steady rise, and then it started plateauing. And again, we're concerned because of the resurgence as we saw in some of the, the states such as Florida and Arizona and California, Alabama. And we saw a surge, and we think that has something to do with a lot of the traveling. And you have travel restrictions that's taking place. You have to be quarantined if you're coming from certain states to certain states. If I'm going to be quarantined for 14 days, and I'm just going somewhere for 5 days or 4 days or a week, until those restrictions are lifted. And there are many countries overseas right now that if you're coming from the US, you're not even allowed to go, or you have to go and you have to be quarantined when you get there. Until that's lifted, we're not going to see that surge. But I think if it's contained, then you'll see that gradual rise. We're watching what's going to happen after Labor Day, September 7th. I think we're going to peak, and then we'll probably drop off after that. Kids start going back to school, etc. And now is when the business traveler typically would take over. If they're still doing Zoom meetings and all these virtual meetings, then I think we're going to see a plateau in our decline again. But I think the vaccine is probably going to be the key, but we're doing everything in our power to try to convince or explain to the general public what we are doing at this airport and what the airlines are doing to make your travel experience as healthy and safe as possible.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And I think, like you said, in terms of, kind of what quarter, could things kind of start to, come back? I think, as you said, it depends on so many unknowns and so many, different factors. I know, lots of businesses are planning to, stay remote, until January. And I think it's interesting, as you mentioned, Lance, that what's leading the, travel industry right now continues to be that, that leisure travel, right? It's not the business travel. And so much of the travel, going in and out of SeaTac Airport is definitely, related to business travel. So I think in many ways until, business, kind of resumes, more of that normal schedule, we won't really see, much of that, uptick in the overall travel, in general. But if I, again, crystal ball, if I had to guess, probably looking at, second or third quarter of next year, right? And that's just with, as you mentioned, the anticipation of when the vaccine, is maybe able to be rolled out. And, when business kind of starts, people start going back to work and start, having conferences and, in-person meetings again. I know, for us at the Chamber, it's been wonderful to continue to produce these virtual events so that we can still connect and get information to our community. But there's no substitute for in-person relationship building, right? And so I think that we will see a return to business travel. But it's definitely it's a few months away before we get to yeah.
And Andrea, I think the good thing is there are certain cultures around the world that they're not going to do business with you virtually. You have to come visit with them. You have to have tea, lunch, dinner, etc. Some of the Asian culture, etc., and Middle East culture. So that's probably a good thing because you will have no choice but to have to travel sometime down the road. But we're still waiting to see how impactful, because it's been proven now, hey, you can actually work remotely, you can have remote meetings, and you can do them successfully. So we're just waiting to see how much of an impact this will have on the travel, especially the business travelers.
I appreciate that. Yes, the American business culture is very much more transactional, than a lot of other business cultures around the world that are more focused on, building that relationship. And so you're right. It's hard to build a relationship and it's hard to build that trust just virtually. And I really appreciate that perspective. So thank you so much. Another question here, with all of the improvements that you have taken to keep everyone safe, passengers and businesses, there is always a cost involved, right? So you mentioned getting some funds, from grants and things, but how do you see this potentially in the future impacting, businesses financially? Will there be, taxes or, additional, extra costs that people at the airport may have to bear that burden, right? So, some type of a sanitation fee or a sanitation tax or, something along those lines.
Well, the good thing is even though we're forecasting that we're going to lose approximately 250 million in revenues, we did get $192 million from the CARES Act. That helped us a whole lot. That allowed us to provide relief to many of our tenants. If we did not get that, even though it's not enough, but if we did not get that, we just wouldn't be able to. We're actually trying to get an additional, the industry got $10 billion before, we're trying to get an additional 13 billion from the next CARES Act. That looks like it's not going to happen, but we're still working with the trade association, and we have gotten tremendous support from our congressional delegation here to support the first one, and also supporting us with our attempt for the second one as well. The good thing though is, for example, that early cleaning that I've spoke about at the TSA, that's extremely expensive for us. We're actually going to get reimbursed from the TSA for that in its entirety. There are also certain things that we're going to get reimbursed from FEMA as well. That's eligible for reimbursement from FEMA. And then we're applying the CARES Act money that we have got to offset some of our operating costs as well as our debt service payment, right? So the objective is to try our best not to pass any of this on to our passengers and visitors coming to the airport, because if that happens, for example, the concessions, they reopen and the concessions, they're too expensive and people might not want to purchase. So we have to try to make sure we keep the cost down as much as possible. But the key, as I said, is the lifeblood of this airport is passengers coming back to the airport. Every business here depends directly or indirectly on passenger traffic, whether it's the taxis, the limousine, the shuttle bus, or it's our airlines or the airport dining and retail. And that's why our emphasis in the Fly Healthy is to restore the confidence of the traveling public to come back to the airport or to start traveling again.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. And then there's a kind of a comment in the chat. So just maybe to add a little, disclaimer or clarification, that first question about, asking, is it safe to fly? Again, I think that everybody has to make that determination, for themselves, right? Because the science surrounding, coronavirus is still, very much, new and in development. Again, it is a novel virus. It is new. So we are in no ways, making that broad general statement. It's safe for everybody to fly, right? What we're saying is that the airport is making precautions, taking precautions to be as clean and sanitary as possible, and to get the information out to the public as clear and concise as possible, so that each individual passenger can make that decision for themselves about whether or not they feel safe and, as you mentioned, confident to fly. So I appreciate that disclaimer there.
Andrea, if I could maybe thank you because I want to reiterate again, we are doing everything in our power to make this airport, and the airlines are doing the same thing as well, to make their aircraft as safe and as healthy as possible. Whether you fly or not, that's an individual decision that you make. I feel comfortable flying, and maybe because I have knowledge of what's happening. It doesn't mean that there are not risks. There are risks associated with it, but it's a decision that each individual will have to make. We're just trying to create an environment that will, provide information to the people who want to travel, to let them feel as comfortable or as possible that this is a healthy environment. But at the end of the day, it's an individual decision.
All right, perfect. So I appreciate that. And this is a question, again, still related to health and safety, and just how does the port clean the air inside the airport? We've heard, some restaurants and businesses that are, updating their HVAC to include some kind of, UVC devices and things like that. Maybe you could talk a little bit just about how the airport is circulated, or how the air is circulated within the airport, and how the air is kept clean as well. We've talked a lot about cleaning surfaces and sanitizing surfaces.
Yes, and I hope you guys saw there was an article on the channel. I can't remember which one of the news media just this week. I think it was, yeah. And they actually featured exactly how that happens at the airport. There's the project on the North Satellite where we're putting in air handlers and or subject matter experts, which I don't want to mess up their good record. And they're showing exactly how the filtration system that we have, how often the air is exchanged in and out the airport, and the type of filters that we have are way, way, way above what's required. There's a rating, MERV rating, that we have for the filtration system here. I think the requirement is like a MERV 7, we're at like a MERV 15. And this actually started from anthrax days. Remember that threat? That's when we had actually put that system in years ago, right? And it's working out very well for us now. So even the new facilities that we're putting in as well as adhering to those standards. So the air that's exchanged or recirculated or exchanged within the facility is almost hospital grade filtration system that we have here at the airport. And I think, and of course, the airlines is very, very similar as well. The airplanes are very similar as well. I don't know if we have anyone from any of the airlines on the call. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This question is just kind of how is Seattle compared to other airports in terms of, regarding travel and, what our capacities is. You talked about, trying to get to that 20,000, passenger mark. Are we seeing more travelers or less travelers, and just a sense of, are people traveling again, obviously probably more domestically because international, travel is, fairly restricted. I know I can't visit my sister-in-law in Germany, right? So maybe expand a little bit on, comparatively speaking, how Seattle's doing to other airports.
It's a very good question. We actually just presented this information to the airport tenants yesterday, and we are actually doing better than most of our peer airports, and we're actually doing better than most of our West Coast airports as well. So that's very, very good. Very, very good for us. There are some airports that are, that are doing much better than us. For example, Dallas, Fort Worth, American Airlines is pumping a whole lot of traffic through Dallas. But in general, we're actually doing much better than most of our peer airports and most of the West Coast airports as well. And to me, one of the positive that was highlighted by the consultants that did the presentation was, we think this region, as usual, will rebound probably faster than the other regions within the U.S. Right? The Northwest region is just you know how it was booming before, and we have a very strong economy in this region, and so we think this region will probably, the expectation is that we will rebound faster. But the airport itself, we're doing actually much better than most of our peer airports, and better than most of the West Coast airports as well in terms of passenger and operations meaning takeoff and landing.
Perfect, great. And then someone just also in the Q&A is just saying that there's more information about that. King 5 has an article from August 26th. So you want to do a little Googling, and we do have yeah, I know, right? It takes a village here. So we do have one of our board members, Scott Kennedy from Alaska Airlines, and I think we're just trying to figure out how we can promote him from an attendee to a panelist, so that he might be able to say a few words.
Yeah, if you can speak about the filtration system and the airplanes itself. And I mean, a lot of people are just not aware how it works, and it would be good if Scott could add to that conversation. It's very important.
Scott?
Hi, Lance. Hi, Andrea. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much for letting me join you. I appreciate it. And Lance, thanks for your comments. I think very similar to the airport, as Lance mentioned, the airlines in Alaska, in our case, are taking this very seriously, and the safety of our guests and employees is of the utmost importance and really is driving every single thing that we do every single day. Lance shared the impacts that we've seen to the industry, which have been significant, very significant. And I think to his comments as well, we also see this is going to be it will be a long trek to full recovery, right? And getting back to those 2019 levels. With regard to what we are doing on our aircraft, and specifically in the airflow and the HEPA filters. So each of our aircraft is outfitted with 2 HEPA filters, and those are hospital grade. There's actually a video that we sent out from Ben Minicucci, our president, about a week or 2 ago, that actually you can get a visual if you look at that of what those HEPA filters look like. And they're very large, and they're outfitted on every single one of our aircraft, regardless of if it's a Boeing, an Airbus, a Bombardier. They're all outfitted with it. And really, when we talk about airflow, it's important to note, I think there's misconceptions about how air is transmitting around on aircraft, how it works. Most people think that it's kind of flowing front to back. And in fact, then there's visuals that we're working on to help depict this. It's really flowing from the top of the cabin down to your feet and out at your feet. And so really, when you think about it, the air that you're getting is not flowing from between passengers. It's flowing from top to bottom, moving out. So there's really not as much, I think, as people believe, of kind of transference of or sharing of air as what many people think is happening on aircraft, which is really important. And those filters do filter out 99.95% of contaminants, including viruses. And so that's something that we really want to make sure people understand, that those planes are outfitted with the best technology. And in Alaska's case, we have one of the newest fleets in the country. So our operations are as up to date as you possibly could be in terms of the technology that's in use. In addition to that, and I think it's important to note that, airflow is not the only thing, and air filters are not the only thing. We're doing a lot of additional things to keep our guests and employees safe. And we call them at Alaska our next level care program. And it's a suite of 100 different measures that we've put into place, all guided by medical experts at UW Medical and infectious diseases, to help us understand and really actually look at, like, okay, if we put something in place, will it have an impact, and will there be risks associated with that? So we really are going through this thought process with every single safety measure that we put in place. One of the things that you'll see that we've taken really significant steps on is enforcing mask compliance on our aircraft. We really have a no tolerance policy with regards to mask requirements. All of our employees wear them. We require everybody on our aircraft that is older than 2 years old to wear masks. And, in terms of exceptions, there had been exceptions in the past, but we've really gotten to a point where we look at this and say, it is critical for everyone's safety that people who can wear a mask must wear a mask. And so we've tamped down on that, and we feel like that is for the best interests of all of the people that we're serving. So that's one of the many things that we're doing. Airflow and the HEPA filters are another significant factor there. And then in addition, we've got other policies related to keeping or limiting the number of people that are on our aircraft, keeping middle seats open through the end of October right now. We're constantly reassessing all of these policies. I mean, everybody knows this is a changing and a dynamic situation. And as we get new information, we look at those very carefully and critically and make decisions based on that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate it. It kind of concludes the Q&A. So, oh wait, no, have I spoke too soon? As soon as I said that, another question popped up. And so I think this might be a question more for you, Scott, which is the size of the micron filtration, with HEPA. And then, I know you're not maybe a subject matter expert. And so, if you don't have this answer, off the top of your head, we can certainly get it back to you. Again, just talking about, the coronavirus and the size of the particulate and the, what's certified, for what, if you have any of that information at your fingertips.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, no, I don't have the specific answer to that. I'd be happy to look into it and circle back with you. And thank you for the question, Ernest.
You might want to say what percent. I think it's 99% of particles are blocked. Maybe that would
no, it's 99.95%. And I know Ernest's comment about not all viruses being the same size. Absolutely true. And happy to circle back on that with you, Andrea.
Perfect. All right, great. So I will get back to the person who asked that question. Let me just take a note here so I don't forget. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, Lance or Scott, before we close out the webinar today?
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, Andrew, and the Chamber for having me speak today. As I said before, this is, you've heard the word over and over again, unprecedented times. And, again, I think we have a really solid plan. Our Fly Healthy at SCA initiative has gone very well. We've done a survey of our passengers, and they appreciate what we're doing. They understand what we're doing, and they have lots of confidence in what we're doing at the airport and what the airlines are doing as well. And they appreciate not just us doing it, but also communicating with them and providing the information. However, as I said, there are certain things we'll have to figure out, right? And even though we might have lots of experts, it's new territory that we're undergoing. So anybody on the line, if you guys have any ideas, any suggestion, right, we're wide open. Please share them with us. If you have maybe traveled recently to some other airport and you see something that they're doing that we might not be doing and you think it would be beneficial for us to do it, please share that information with us. We don't think we have a monopoly on smarts. We'll take good ideas anywhere it comes from. I think we have a brilliant team here, but we have brilliant people everywhere as well, all over the region as well. So we're wide open to suggestions. We're wide open to ideas. Please feel free to provide feedback from us when you come through the facilities. If you see anything that you think we could be doing better, please share that information with us and let us know.
Perfect. Great. Well, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone taking the time, to be with us here today. This, Port Luncheon definitely looked different than, it has in the past, but we're still grateful for the opportunity to be able to, connect, engage, and as you mentioned, just share that communication. Our chamber was founded on the belief that we're better and stronger together, and how we get together looks a little different these days, but it's really important that we still, prioritize that information sharing and that connection. So again, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. Want to also thank our sponsors and our members. Again, we couldn't be here without your support, and we hope that you will all continue to join us as we provide opportunities to connect and engage in the future. Our next webinar event that we have coming up is our Mayor's Reception, and that is also virtual at the evening of September 23rd. So again, hope everyone has a fantastic Labor Day holiday. Stay safe, stay healthy. And again, any questions or concerns, please reach out. Really appreciate everyone being here today. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.